we use that term climate anxiety, and I think that's almost a little bit, it's become a little bit disparaging in terms of almost feeling like we're worrying about nothing. But in reality, for a lot of us, you know, in our lived conditions, that anxiety is a real thing, because it's about, you know, people that, we again, to return that 50 years, we think, well, that's ages away, you've got time to sort that out. But these are properties and these are areas of the coast that they have no, you know, there's no interest and no value in being able to preserve those. People can't sell homes to move away from there. There's lots of stories where people are essentially kind of stuck and stranded in these conditions, and no doubt that has that effect on them. And I really want to pull elements of that into what I've written and what I want to kind of write going forwards as well.
And do you think sometimes is that, you know, like there's so much going on in life, whatever, and it's just like, oh, climate, environment is like another thing, and I feel like we're aware. I don't feel like we're ignorant to it. Maybe many years ago we didn't know, but I feel like there's enough out there that we do know about it. But like with many things, when it feels doom and gloom, it's almost like, yeah, I know that's happening. However, I'm gonna, I know that's happening until it happens. Right? Do you know what I mean? Like until the 50 years becomes now, you know. Yeah. And I think for a lot of us, because we just want to kind of like just get through the week. It's like that's a big problem. That's over their problem, but it's affecting us now.
Yeah.
You know, I think that.
Well, there's definitely those elements of it that we kind of feel inclined to want to be able to kind of just stick our head in the sand with it, but it's.
And I get it, right? But
yeah, for sure. I think there's some really kind of tricky and difficult emotions attached to people thinking about climate. I think words like guilt, you know, words like shame, like
blame,
and they're words that they're not they're not people's favourite words.
Course,
and I think we need to move away from framing narratives of climate in those terms when we're talking to people every day, because that's not going to be a constructive way of being able to have people feel able to engage with that when we're inherently kind of, you know, pushed away from that conversation by those terms that can really feel too big. They can feel too kind of all-encompassing and just removed from us.
I think so. And I just think that when things do feel big and whenever, like I you know, just going back to that kind of storytelling, like I feel like there's you know, like counteracting like the anxiety is like, okay, this is happening, it is really whatever, so what can we do that feels doable, that feels bite-sized? Because I think a lot of this anxiety, because it feels so big, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I just think it feels so big, and I think a way to, as I said, because it sits in an academic space a lot of the time, or we hear about it in the news, but again, it feels removed, it feels remote. You know, what's great about theatre and art, it brings it a bit closer, it's digestible, it's understandable, it's a creative way of understanding what this is. And I think more and more of that, and I think like with your play A to B, that's probably doing that as well, with, you know, like regular everyday folk kind of characters, like, do you know what I mean? They're not like, you know, and I think that's probably another way in, that's another way to really kind of understand.
Yeah, so B&B, the play's called.
B&B, what did I say?
A to B?
A to B.
It's a good title as well, though.
Yeah.
I mean, to go into something here, actually, the reason why it's called B&B is because it not only is it set largely in a B&B, it's borrowing elements from fairy tales, so specifically Beauty and the Beast. That is a kind of thematic thread that runs through that narrative. And I think that's where there's that element of creativity with this. I think seeing the parallels or finding parallels or kind of seeing how you can interact, you know, theme with climate, seeing how you can interact tropes of, you know, things like horror. I've also written a short piece that sort of pulls on like cosmic horror that's around coastal pollution and river pollution, and it's about seeing those little things of those access points that are exciting, that are engaging. You know, fairy tales and horror and even things like comedy can be really effective ways of being able to kind of pull people in, but you've got them there and you're holding them there, and they're receptive to what you're writing about, because you're finding those access points. It's not something that's this remote, distant point, you know, in the distance. It's two people having a conversation, and you know, what's more real than that, you know?
Absolutely. And as a writer, then, because you've mentioned B&B and then you've mentioned other things. So for you as a writer, the journey of climate dramaturgy and kind of like climate change and action in your writing, that feels quite pertinent, quite important to you.
Yeah, I think again, to return to my experience of living in Suffolk and being from Suffolk, and it being a county that is rural and it can feel very spread out in terms of, you know, the areas where people live in Suffolk, but it also is a gift in the sense of the kinds of landscapes that are here and that are unique to this part of the world. But as I said, I've got experiences of things like going to some of the beaches in Suffolk with my grandparents, and they've been going to these beaches since they were young themselves. You know, they've got experience of what that looks like 50 years ago, and in their own words they can tell me how, you know, something that is now kind of completely engulfed by water, there's areas that you know, literally within their lifetime those beaches have shrunk.
And it's so important that different people are in this conversation, right? Because again, a lot of the time with climate change, climate dramaturgy, it's in those academic spaces, it's in those white spaces, and it's affecting everybody, you know. And I don't often think that we get to be in those spaces to talk about it and how it affects us deeply and personally, and how it affects, whether it's our health, whether it's our environment, you know, whatever it may be. And we're not often in those conversations, I think, because of where it sits. And I just think, again, through kind of this and through art, through writing, that's just another way in. It's another way to connect and to say, hang on, we've got something to say about this as well, you know.
I think there's almost a bit of a thread of kind of maybe putting too much presumption around, this climate is going to largely affect more rural spaces. Rural spaces are more likely to have a certain kind of demographic. Therefore, this is an issue that affects these kinds of people. You know, it's affecting communities across urban, rural spaces, coastal, inland. I think we almost feel like we put too much emphasis on what a climate story is meant to look like, when in reality, it could be any story, because it's, you know, it's people's everyday experiences.
It could be. It really could be. 100%. And the stories that come across, like in my inbox around climate, or if I've ever been like a reader for, like, you know, and the play, like the theme is, it's climate change, whatever. It's like, it's big plays, and I just think, I'm trying to find that one that feels so hit in realism. It feels so realistic to the everyday folk that might be living in this particular town or city or this community. Where are those plays around, you know? Where is it, as I said, where's the plays that bring it really closer to home? You know, I just I'll be honest, some of them are boring, and that's why sometimes when you say climate change or whatever, they're like, you get the eye roll, you know. But I just think there's such a creative way, and what's our artistic response to it, you know? And I think, and I know people are doing it, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's all bad out there, but even more so, what's our artistic response to that?
I think there's very much that kind of pessimism of looking at it as a limitation, looking at it as something that you've got to plug into what you're writing. It's got to be this badge or this banner. When I think, you know, a real climate story that's told, you know, authentically and told with good intention, it's at the foundations of what you're telling. It doesn't mean it's the exact, you know, overarching theme or overarching element of what you're writing, because I would say with B&B, even though it's a major element of the setting and it comes up in discussion between the characters, it's actually a play about change, and it's a play about navigating relationships between parents and children, and about how, you know, as much as we can try and push back change like a tide, it's kind of inevitable. Those changes will come to us.
But the thing is, it's like with any theme or any whatever, there's going to be other themes within that, right? So yes, there's, you know, there's the coastal erosion and the environment, but then like you're saying, there's familial stories in there too. And again, I think when you think of climate change stories, it's this big thing over there, when it's like, how do we integrate actually and incorporate these stories with kind of like other themes that, as I said, resonate. My word of the day here is resonate. Like, do you know what I mean? It can, and they can and they should resonate, you know.
I think the big word for me that is always the word that crops out as soon as I think about climate dramaturgy is it's about reciprocity.
Oh, that is such a good word. I love that word.
Because I think that approaches it from both levels, really. So with dramaturgy, you know, I think there's a lot of work being done around, well, I say being done, I think there's still a lot of work needs to be done around decolonising and really interrogating traditional dramaturgical structures, Western dramaturgical structures.
Listen, you're saying the right words, Anoop.
They're very much centred in these narratives of a protagonist moving through their environment. It's about what do they take, what do they gain, and they're very much ego-driven stories that kind of remove our sense of personhood from our sense of place. And I think there's no reciprocity there, and that's very much where I feel like at a fundamental level, if we think more carefully about, well, what do they, you know, what these protagonists, what do they leave? What do they give to the places they go to? How do those how those places change? How do those places change them? I think thinking about those things are, you know, really key to being able to unlock that element of climate, because they're funny because they're both words that are systems. A climate is a system, and dramaturgy is about discussing drama as a system.
As a system,
And in that way, you know, system, you can think of ecosystem, and it's not glib, because an ecosystem is a cycle, and it's things that fit together and are things that are reciprocal. There has to be balance in an ecosystem. It's give and take, it's push and pull. So you really have to be able to...
You know, I never saw it. Okay, mic drop. Yeah, it's so true what you're saying.
Yeah, it's there. It's, you know, you can't really kind of take for granted about, you know, how you weigh a narrative up as being, oh, well, it's about this person's journey to this, from A to B. But it's so much more than that, because it's, you know, we even fictional environments, there's an element of they are drawn from our real experiences, even if it's fantasy, even if it's sci-fi, even if it's set in, you know, 5,000 years in the future, it's still grounded in our own understanding and experience of the world, and therefore it comes from now. You know, we can't separate place and time from what we write, because it's just it's embedded in that, you know, inherently. So.
Wow.
Kind of heavy, yeah.
No, but so real, so real. Honestly, reciprocity. Forget resonate. Mine was rubbish. Reciprocity. That is so like everything that you said there is just gold. It's so true. Oh, it's so gold. I love that.
Thank you. I mean, that's the thing. It's just it's one word, but for me, that's what really gets at that core of those two things. You know, not putting them separately. That unites that. You know, climate dramaturgy. It's about reciprocity for me. It's about the two, but also individually, how is there that reciprocity between ourselves and our climate and environment, and how is there that reciprocity between how we tell stories about ourselves as well.
How we tell stories about ourselves.
Because that's always what stories are. You know, at the end of the day, they're as removed as they can feel from time and place from us, or as fantastical as they can feel. The core of what we write has to come from somewhere. So yeah.